Welcome to this day in His story, a daily reminder that the Lord's hand is in every chapter of time, created by American heritage worldwide. Today, November 4th, we are celebrating Election Day. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now.
Today, we're tackling something really specific, something that's been around forever in American politics, but maybe still feels a bit weird. Election Day. We all know the date, right? But why is it always the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November?
Yeah.
It just sounds so overly complicated, like Congress was handing us a calendar riddle instead of just making a straightforward law.
It really does sound convoluted, doesn't it? But, when you actually unpack that specific phrasing, you get this amazing snapshot of what life was like in the U.S. back in the 19th century.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it was all dictated by things like the economy, religion, even the weather. So our mission today, really, is to get into that 1845 law that set this date
Right.
and understand how it actually changed American democracy by, forcing everyone onto the same page.
Yeah.
Standardization.
And that standardization was definitely needed, wasn't it? Before 1845, states had this huge window, 34 days?
Yeah, 34 days before the first Wednesday in December to hold their presidential elections.
Wow. That sounds like chaos. Total decentralization. You can imagine the confusion, maybe even some political game playing.
Exactly. And that's why they passed the law. It specifically said presidential electors had to be chosen on, and this is the quote, the Tuesday next, after the first Monday in the month of November.
The goal was streamlining, making it consistent.
Precisely.
But hang on, why the complexity? Why not just say, the first Tuesday of November? Why that really specific bit about following the first Monday?
Okay, good question. It actually goes back to making sure the election could never fall on November 1st.
Oh, interesting. Why not?
Well, November 1st is All Saints' Day, a religious observance for some. But more practically, it was often a day when businesses and courts finalized accounts from the previous month. They didn't want Election Day conflicting with that.
I see.
So by saying the Tuesday next after the first Monday, they guaranteed the election would always happen between November 2nd and November 8th.
Okay, that makes sense now. It's like a legal mechanism to build in a buffer zone.
Right. It provided that needed consistency across all, 30 states that existed back then?
And it worked.
Yeah. The sources show that by the presidential election of 1848, just 3 years later, every single state was voting on the exact same day.
Okay, so let's really dive into this.
Yeah.
What was life like in 1845 that made this specific Thursday the only logical choice? And then how have the rights connected to that day changed over the years?
It all starts with understanding 1845 America.
Which was overwhelmingly
Agrarian, farming,
right.
the whole economy, the whole rhythm of life revolved around agriculture, planting seasons, harvest times, livestock that set the national calendar, not Congress, really.
So finding a day for everyone to vote was a serious logistical challenge.
Huge challenge. You had to balance the demands of the farm work with just the sheer difficulty of travel back then. It wasn't easy getting around.
Right.
You needed a time when people could actually travel safely, and the schedule had to fit around their religious and economic routines. These were not negotiable things.
Okay, let's break down those conflicts. First off, weekends were basically out, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Farmers often lived miles and miles away from the county seat. That was usually the only place to vote.
A long trip.
A very long trip, often taking a day or more by wagon. And you couldn't travel on Sunday. Sunday was for church, for family, conducting official business like voting.
Yeah.
That was frowned upon.
Okay, so Sunday's out for travel and voting. What about Monday?
Well, Monday often became a travel day, especially if you lived far out. You'd head out after church on Sunday, or early Monday, to get to the county seat in time to vote on Tuesday.
Gotcha. So that eliminates the weekend and uses Monday for travel. What about Wednesday?
Wednesday was usually market day.
Oh.
That was the day farmers absolutely had to take their crops or maybe some livestock into town to sell. It wasn't just, a casual thing. It was vital for their income. Couldn't skip market day.
Okay, so if Sunday is church, Monday is travel, Wednesday is market, Tuesday is looking like the only real option left in the early week.
Exactly. It becomes the first practical day. It gave people time to travel after Sunday, cast their vote, and crucially, get back home before they needed to head to market on Wednesday.
Makes perfect sense from a scheduling perspective, but
Yeah.
then there's the time of year, right? Why November?
Yeah, the seasonal constraints were just as important. Think about the farming calendar, spring and summer. Impossible. That's planting season, tending crops.
Can't leave the farm then.
Absolutely not. Late summer or early fall. That runs right into the harvest. That was the single most critical time of the year. Pulling farmers away during harvest could literally mean losing the year's food and income.
A total disaster for a family.
A complete disaster.
Yeah.
So November emerged as this sort of perfect window.
The sweet spot.
The sweet spot, exactly. The harvest was mostly finished, so the hardest labor was done. But, and this is key, it was usually before the really harsh winter weather arrived.
Before the snow and ice made those long wagon journeys impossible or dangerous.
Precisely. Muddy roads, frozen rivers. Travel could become incredibly difficult. So this date we still use. It's basically a relic of necessity, post-harvest, pre-winter, fitting neatly between Sunday church and Wednesday market.
Wow, when you put it like that, it seems so logical. Now, thinking about the effort involved that long journey, taking time off the farm, it really changes how you picture historical election day, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. For that farmer making the trek to the county seat, this wasn't just ticking a box, it was a major event, a social highlight even.
Really? Tell me more about that.
Well, the sources paint this picture of a real spectacle. Families wouldn't just, pop down the road. They'd plan for this trip.
Like a holiday.
Almost, yeah. They'd wear their absolute best clothes. When they arrived in town, there might be parades down the main street. It was a community gathering, a chance to see friends and neighbors you might not have seen since, well, the last big town event.
So it sounds like fun, a celebration almost. Which makes me wonder, why did the sources emphasize voting as a privilege, honor, and duty? If it was such a big social affair, wouldn't people just want to go anyway?
That's a really insightful question. I think that emphasis on duty highlights just how highly they valued participation itself.
Ah.
It wasn't just about the social side. Being eligible to vote, being part of shaping the country's direction, that was seen as a serious responsibility, a marker of status. And the turnout numbers from back then really reflect that sense of high importance.
Okay, let's hear those numbers. How many people actually showed up?
Well, in 1848, that first election held nationwide on the same day under the new rule, turnout was 72.7% of eligible voters.
72%. That's impressive, especially given the travel difficulties.
It is. And then, 12 years later, 1860, a hugely important election, obviously right before the Civil War, turnout hit 81.2%.
81%. That's incredible. We barely get, what, 2/3 turnout now in major elections, maybe 66, 67% in 2020?
Roughly, yeah. Those 19th century numbers are massive by comparison.
So people back then were clearly very motivated.
They were, but, and this is the crucial point we have to ask, 81% of whom?
Ah, right. The pool of eligible voters was tiny back then.
Extremely tiny. That incredibly high turnout percentage was drawn from a very, very restricted group of people. Voting was a privilege, yes, but one held almost exclusively by a narrow slice of the population.
And that is the big shift, isn't it? The date, that Tuesday in November, was set in 1845 for those farmers. But since then, the story of Election Day has really been about the struggle over who gets to be part of that eligible voter group.
Exactly. The landscape of the voter has been completely transformed through decades, even centuries, of constitutional change and social struggle.
So let's trace that evolution. Where did it start, constitutionally speaking?
Well, you have to go right back to the beginning, 1776, and the founding era. Voting then, severely limited.
What were the rules?
You generally had to be white, male, a citizen, you had to own property, a certain amount of it, and you had to be over 21.
Okay, so that excludes almost everyone. Women, people of color, poor white men, younger men.
The vast majority of the population, yes. The first major constitutional shift comes after the Civil War.
With the Reconstruction Amendment.
Right. First, the 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868. This was foundational. It granted citizenship, and importantly, the rights that go with citizenship, to all persons born or naturalized in the U.S., which critically included formerly enslaved people.
So citizenship established first. Then the specific right to vote needed to be addressed.
Exactly. That came just a year later with the 15th Amendment in 1869. It stated very clearly that the right to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude.
A landmark moment, legally. Yeah. Though, of course, putting that into practice faced enormous resistance for another century.
Immense resistance, yes. Jim Crow laws, poll taxes, literacy tests. The promise of the 15th Amendment wasn't fully realized for a very long time.
Okay, so that addressed race, at least on paper. What was the next big expansion?
We jump forward about 50 years to 1920. That's the 19th Amendment.
Women's suffrage.
Right. After decades and decades of activism and struggle by suffragists, the 19th Amendment was finally ratified, granting American women the right to vote. That basically doubled the potential electorate overnight.
A huge change. And then there's one more major piece in this constitutional puzzle relating to age.
Yes, and the context there is really important. The Vietnam War.
Right. Young men were being drafted at 18, sent to fight and potentially die for the country, but they couldn't vote for the leaders making those decisions until they were 21.
Exactly. The slogan was, old enough to fight, old enough to vote. That movement gained huge traction.
And led to
The 26th Amendment, ratified pretty quickly in 1971. It lowered the national voting age to 18.
So that completes the main constitutional journey from only property-owning white men over 21 to, at least in principle, all adult citizens, regardless of race, sex, or wealth.
That's the broad arc, yes.
Okay, so we've gone from the practical reasons for when we vote that post-Harvest Tuesday to the long struggle over who gets to vote. Let's bring it to today. For you listening now, if you're eligible, what are the key things you need to know? What are the modern requirements?
Well, the absolute first step is registration. You have to be registered to vote.
And deadlines vary a lot by state, right?
They do. You really need to check your specific state's rules and deadlines well in advance. Then, the basics. You have to be a U.S. citizen. You need to meet your state's residency requirements, how long you've lived there.
And the age, thanks to that 26th Amendment.
You need to be 18 years old on or before Election Day itself. Not just 18 sometime during the year, but actually 18 by the day you vote.
Okay. And one more modern thing, ID requirement.
Yes, that's become increasingly common. Most states now require you to show some form of official identification at the polls. Again, the specifics vary state by state, so check what your state requires.
It's also probably worth quickly mentioning the main reasons why someone might be prevented from voting, even if they're a citizen over 18.
Sure. The main categories are not being a U.S. citizen, obviously. Then, in many states, having a felony conviction can affect your voting rights, though those laws differ significantly, and some states restore rights after time served or parole.
Okay.
And finally, being found mentally incapacitated by a court can also prevent someone from voting. But for most adult citizens, these aren't the hurdles.
The main hurdle is making the effort, getting registered, getting informed.
Exactly, which brings us back full circle to that idea we talked about earlier, voting as not just a right, but also an honor and duty.
The modern version of that 19th century farmer's sense of obligation?
I think so. And the source material we looked at really emphasizes that today, the core responsibility isn't just showing up on Tuesday. It's about being informed.
That's a key point. Being informed today is maybe harder than ever, isn't it? Back in 1845, information was scarce. Now we're drowning in it and figuring out what's reliable. That's the challenge.
That's the modern challenge, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a quote from President Dallin H that addresses this directly. He said, "The first presidency always reminds us, we have the responsibility to become informed about the issues and candidates and to independently exercise our right to vote."
Independently exercise. That implies critical thinking, not just absorbing one viewpoint.
Right. The duty is active, requires conscious effort. You can't just rely on, headlines or social media sound bites. You actually have to dig in, learn about the different issues, learn about the people running for office.
And importantly, the sources stress this applies even if you can't vote yet, right?
Yes, very clearly. This responsibility is to start learning, to become informed about the issues facing your community and country. It doesn't start when you turn 18. It's something young people are encouraged to do now as preparation for exercising that right later. It's about building civic muscle.
Okay, so this has been quite the journey. We went from the very practical, almost mundane reasons for choosing a Tuesday in November way back in 1845, dictated by farming, travel, weather, all the way through these huge constitutional battles over 2 centuries to expand who even gets to participate on that day.
Yeah, from agrarian necessity to fundamental rights, what really stands out is just how hard-won these voting rights were and how consistently the advice is to use them thoughtfully and responsibly.
Right.
So thinking about that long history, all this struggle involved in expanding the vote and that clear counsel about the duty to be informed, maybe the final thought for you, the listener, is this. What active steps can you take starting right now to really follow that advice, to genuinely learn about the issues, as President Oaks put it, and maybe even start talking about them thoughtfully with your family and friends? Because ultimately, the franchise seems to be as much about understanding as it is about casting the ballot itself.
That's a powerful challenge, connecting that long history right back to our personal responsibility today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the story behind U.S. Election Day. We hope this leaves you feeling more informed and maybe even more motivated to engage with this fundamental aspect of democracy.
Thank you for joining us for this day in his story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now.